Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sam Kern, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Warrant Officer Trish McIntosh. We warmly welcome the family of Private George Stevens, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they'd done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honor, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private George Stevens. George Stevens was born on the 29th of March 1897 near Warwick, Queensland. The eldest of 9 children, born to grazier George Stevens Sr. and his wife Elizabeth, he received his education at Rockwood State School before moving to Toowoomba, where he continued his studies at Bullock's College. George enjoyed both tennis and fishing and was also a member of the local militia. At the outbreak of the war in 1914, he was working as a grazier on his father's property, Rockwood, near Warwick. George Stevens enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 28th of May 1916. He was assigned to the 11th Machine Gun Company and began a short period of training in Australia. He embarked for active service from Melbourne in February the following year on board the troop ship Austerley. Private Stevens arrived in England in early April 1917. He was sent to the village of Grantham, where he continued training at the machine gun depot. After 2 months there, he embarked for the Western Front, joining his unit in Belgium in mid-June. He spent the first few weeks of active service in billets behind the lines, training, cleaning, and checking stores. In July, the 11th Machine Gun Company relocated to Warnton, east of Messine. Allied units were attempting to advance their position to place themselves within striking distance of the German lines. His brigade was tasked with digging a new front line hundreds of metres forward from their previous position. Under constant attack from enemy lines, they worked there under difficult conditions. Their efforts at Warnton were later remembered as the 18 Days. During this time, Private Stevens worked with his unit to support infantry raids and attacks on German outposts and defensive positions fortified by barbed wire and concrete blocks. A major attack was launched by the 9th Brigade at the end of the month, which resulted in the capture of the German outposts, which then firmly held, despite heavy counterattacks from enemy. By August 1917, the Allied front had advanced another few hundred metres. The 11th Machine Gun Company later moved to billets behind the lines and continued training throughout August. The following month, the men were moved to the Belgian village of Popperinga, where they camped in tents before their return to the front line. They were preparing to march out the front on the 29th of September when their camp was attacked by enemy aircraft. The attackers bombed the tent lines, killing and wounding more than 60 men, including Private Stevens. His comrade described the attack. We had been at Popperinga and were going up the line to mend the trenches when we were attacked by a German aeroplane some miles behind the lines. 2 bombs were dropped, causing us several casualties, including Stevens, who was severely wounded. He was a very lively, talkative and willing man and was very good-natured. Private Stevens was transferred to a Canadian casualty clearing station for treatment, but his wounds were too severe and he died shortly after arrival. He was later buried nearby at Lissenhoek Military Cemetery, where he lies today. His parents later posted a memorial notice to George in the local newspaper which read, "We pictured his safe returning and longed for a clasp of his hand, but God has postponed the meeting. Someday we will understand. Somewhere in France there's a sacred spot. 'Tis a grave just 2 years made. It's sheltering our boy from perils and ills, which with life's battles is played. He has finished his part. We must still keep on, trying like him to be brave. Our sacrifice is in what we have lost, his in what he gave." Private George Stevens was 20 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right among almost 63,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private George Stevens, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozier or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff, and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.